Today it's time for something special, something that I don't cover on this YouTube channel nearly as often as I would like to. It's not just time for a single match. It's not time for a best of 3, not even a best of 5. But what I've got for you today is a best of 7 series. And my favorite part of this all is that both of these players are channel favorites. So let's get started by introducing them. Spawning here in game number 1 of this best of 7 on the right hand side of Automaton and playing with the red Protoss probes. He's the strongest player from the United States of America. Of course that means we are looking inside of the main base of Neeb. And his opponent on the left hand side from Canada, playing with the blue Zerg drones. She goes by the name of Scarlett. So this should be a really fun series. Now, for those of you curious, this is the grand finals of the WCS Winter Americas. So what this means is that I am assuming at the very least that some of you have already seen the grand finals. Personally, I didn't get to watch the games live. I was planning on watching the VODs. However, then I realized the wonderful folks over at Blizzard Entertainment had already released the replay pack. So that means I could watch the VOD myself, but I'd rather actually cast it myself and then share it with some of you here as well. So this should be an awesome series. Now, for those of you that did watch the WCS Winter for both Europe and America, there were a lot of games that were played and I didn't get to watch all of them. Was there like one series or one match in particular that you thought was really awesome? Let me know down below in the comment section, because I mean there's a lot of great replays available right now and I don't really know exactly which ones I should go ahead and cast. So if there was a game in particular that you would recommend, feel free to let me know down below in the comment section, and I might very well cast it in the next coming weeks. Anyhow, here we go. Now, obviously, a best of 7 series. That changes the dynamic of StarCraft entirely, especially for Zerg versus Protoss. Most of the time, it is going to be the Protoss player who has to put some pressure on the Zerg. It is absolutely critical that Zerg is not allowed to just simply go straight up to like 80 workers without any kind of pressure. Because in an ideal world, that is what Zerg would like to do, right? If Zerg players can get 80 drones for free, their economy is just going to be booming because they can produce so many workers at such a quick pace. Now, in a best of 7 series, it is absolutely impossible for Protoss to play the same build over and over and over again. Usually, for example, if you're playing ladder games, right, you're gonna be pretty confident in 1 or 2 builds, and you can play those depending on the map that you're on. However, I would argue that in a best of 7, you probably need like 3, 4, maybe even 5 different build orders. And usually, if you're playing the same opponent, right, it's really critical to try and prevent them from figuring out exactly what it is you're going up against. Because if you do the same build over and over and over again, so in this particular match right here, we see Neeb going up to watch that Stargate really quickly. If you were to do that in the next matches as well, or the next maps rather as well, I wouldn't be surprised that Scarlett is going to respond by playing very greedily and cutting out all kinds of early game defense, because she can read them obviously like a book. But already, well, I guess 1 drone right there does go down. Nothing too crazy just yet. Although with the Oracle coming up right here, I do think that Neeb is planning to put on at least a couple more of those drone kills in this game. Usually, when it comes to getting a sufficient amount of drone kills, we are talking about like, I would say like 8 or so drones in total. If Protoss can get 8 to 10 drones, they're gonna be in a good spot. Usually Protoss players seem to aim for about 10, and that is when they feel most confident. Now likewise, obviously, if Zerg doesn't take a lot of damage, that immediately also means that Zerg is gonna be in a good spot. So it's critical to see where this game is going to take us. Now Scarlett plans on apparently defending right here, but she's already got that Nydus network coming up. The Nydus network did come out very quickly. Obviously, the recent patch does now allow it to take a lot more damage. The question is this Nydus worm gonna be picked off before it emerges? The probes obviously pulled off the light as well, and I do think that that is going to be enough. It's going to be enough. At the same time, though, the Zerglings knocking down the front door here. Scarlett putting down another Nydus worm back in the natural. This is pretty far away, and I think right now, Neeb is gonna have a very hard time dealing with that. The Void Ray, though, will be able to use its prismatic alignment. Zerglings are gonna flood out, and at the same time, Scarlett also gets a couple queens out, which allows her to, of course, transfuse the Nydus worm. Couple probes, though, finally being picked up, but the question is this actually enough right now? Scarlett decided to retreat right now as well with a lot of the Zerglings that were knocking down the front door. They are now, I think, gonna head into the main base here as well with another Nydus worm coming out, although for now, she has decided to just simply commit all of her units to the natural instead. This is a build that on paper shouldn't work anymore. This is a build that technically got nerfed pretty hard, but I guess Scarlett saw, okay, you're gonna go for a really, really greedy opener with the Stargate, not really make a lot of defensive units and structures. That means, you know what, I'm just gonna go for a Nydus Worm. I'll put one in your main base, sure you can kill that one, but then the Stalker and the Adepts have to make their way all the way over towards the natural, and they won't make it in time. So Scarlett picks up a quick victory here in game number 1. Alrighty, so in just a couple minutes time, we already find ourselves in game number 2. So even though the Nydus Worm did get nerfed, apparently it is still very viable if you scout that your opponent is playing a little bit greedy, and if you know that they have to run a really far distance to make their way from the outer edge of the main all the way towards the outer edge of the natural. I mean, on this map, it's already going to be a little bit harder, right? I mean, this right over here to like right over there, I think that's manageable for those Protoss units, but on Automaton, Scarlett realized, wait a second, it takes a long time for those units to just simply walk over there. The first network, or rather the first worm, might get killed. The second one should be able to go up. Now, for those of you curious, by the way, what ended up getting nerfed, and this is always really annoying as well for Protoss, manages right there to get the block on the natural. But the thing that got nerfed recently with the new patch that went live, actually at this point only a couple of days ago, these games right here were played after that balance change went live. But the Nydus Worm, while emerging, now has 3 armor, and back in the previous patch it had 5 armor. Doesn't sound very significant, but when you think of the fact that a probe deals 5 damage per hit, in the past it would deal, well, 5 minus 5 would be 0, but since the minimum amount of damage that a unit in StarCraft can deal is 0.5, in the past, in the previous patch, a probe would deal 0.5 damage. However, in the new patch, since the Nydus Worm, while emerging, now has 3 armor, a worker would deal 5 minus 3 attack, or 3 damage per hit, which means that nowadays it deals 2 damage per hit, which is very, very significant. So workers right now went from dealing 0.5 damage per hit to dealing 2 damage. Now, obviously, you know, StarCraft isn't all about math and numbers, but you can easily figure out that it's much, much easier as well for a Protoss player to get rid of those pesky Nydus Worms as long as you've got your probes there in time and as long as you've got a couple units attacking it at the same time as well. Now, I was wondering how Neeb managed to actually block that natural there by Scarlett, and I guess it's because of this pylon being a little bit further out. Most of the time, we see the... I know we're really getting into details today, apparently. But most of the time, we see Protoss players putting up their first pylon right over there. If you put down your pylon over there with the standard probe on the low ground, right? If you put the pylon over there and you then move it across the map, you will actually arrive on the other side of the map, on this particular Kairos Junction map. You would arrive there right when the hatchery that gets planted down at 16 supply would be down. So usually at that point, you can't block it. So it turns out if you put the pylon a little bit further out, right? So instead of right over there, you put it down over here. The probe has traveled just a little bit more. And that means apparently you can force your opponent to take the third base rather than the natural as their very first expansion. Cheeky little play right there by Neeb, showing us that he's a very strong player. And obviously, while he is currently 1-0 behind, I don't think he's going to be all too bothered. Already though, making some adjustments here. Rather than going for the Stargate, we see that robotics facility. The Adept getting a single kill so far. I guess that was just a single Zergling, so not too big of a deal. A couple links though do make their way right now inside of the main base here of Protoss, and that's always a little bit annoying here for the red Protoss player, because now Zerg knows exactly what it is they need to deal with, and apparently a single probe actually will lose its life right there as well. Now, obviously, the downside of having these structures a little bit further out is that you need, I guess, an extra pylon to power this all. I don't think the power field would be enough right there to power that gateway there on the top side of this ramp. But anyways, the American, he knows how to make a wall, okay? Let's just leave it at that. Before people get upset at me in the comment section. Oh, nice little bit of control there, though, by Neeb. A lot of links are currently making their way across. Now, this is awkward. That sentry actually might get picked off for free, right? Yeah, look. That's gonna spawn outside of the wall, and that is a big, big waste. I guess it's gonna allow this, well, the Prism is a little bit late here as well. I guess it's gonna allow these links now to pick up the gateway, which is actually gonna hurt this follow-up here for Neeb quite a bit. Now, keep in mind, though, Scarlett is committing with a lot of Zerglings. She's actually running more links across the map. What is going on here? This kind of looks like a game from Wings of Liberty, I guess, when we were still trying to figure out how these StarCraft 2 units interact. But Scarlett recognizes the wall that Neeb is going for, and she's like, you know what? I'm just gonna go ahead and move across the map. The Warp Gate research did finish, right? Yes, it did. So that's really, really critical. But still, Neeb is gonna have to reconstruct the wall. Well, I mean, at the very least, he's very good at that, right? Being American and all. He's very solid at doing exactly that. But the links are still going to town, and we see more of them moving across the map. I wonder if Scarlett is overcommitting here, though. Right? I mean, this is still a scary Protoss amount of economy. Right? So that's 44 Zerglings going down there. I honestly don't think that was worth it. I mean, if you look right now at the worker count as well, 34 workers here for Protoss versus 25 for Zerg. That is not a situation that Zerg ever wants to be in. Scarlett really needs to make sure right now that she gets that worker count up, because I think actually one of the best things that Neeb could do at this point is just put down a lot of gateways and move across the map. So this is going to be 6 gates in total. I think he could actually go up to like 8. I don't think that would be all too crazy. Actually, no, it's going to be... Yeah, it is going to be 6 in total. That one of them was a cyber core, which obviously had to be replanted down as well. I don't think it's a bad idea to just simply move with the good old Immortal Sentry all-ins. This was a very common build that we saw back in, like, I would say 2012 or so. Neeb, though, decides to go for a little bit of aggression here with 2 Adepts inside of a Prism, inside of a plane. They don't really manage to get too much work done, it looks like, but... It's gonna be difficult at this point to try and take a third with a lot of those Zerglings still hanging out on the map. I really do think if Neeb decides to go right now for a push, with the 3rd Immortal finishing up, he can start one-shotting Roaches here as well, and I think that's going to be the defense here for Scarlett. He's going to be able to put, at the very least, this Zerg in a very, very tough position. Great hold so far here by Neeb, losing a couple structures. He just needs to make sure that these links do not flood in. If these Zerglings... Is that too wide of a gap for one Zealot? Kind of feels like it is. Well, I guess we'll find out in a little bit, because if these Zerglings manage to get their way into the natural... Oh my god, it's sleeping on the job! Well, I mean, then it certainly is. Then it certainly is trouble. I guess for now, though, with the Adepts, you know, being warped in here in the bases, it's okay, but obviously that hurts quite a bit on the other side of the map, and we do indeed now see that Prism trying to pick up as many of those wounded units as possible. Zerglings managed to get a really good surround here as well. The one observer is overseeing everything that's going on. A lot of reinforcements right now, though, for Zerg are coming up, and I think actually Neeb is in a good spot. Manages to keep all of those really important units alive. As long as the Immortals are here, this fight is still going on. Worker-wise, both players are very even right at this point, but Scarlett doesn't have a lot of creep spread, and that means that reinforcing this is gonna be so much harder. It all comes down right now to the control right here of the American Protoss player. He's trying his very best to keep all of these very good units alive. Does manage to slice off one of those Ravagers as well. Neeb picking up the wounded units once again, using the Prism here as well to bring the reinforcements to the party. Just simply killing that one creep tumor. That one creep tumor there is actually a really big deal as well. Neeb is smelling blood in the water, but he hasn't done a lot of damage just yet as far as the economy goes. But now with the Adepts headed towards the main base, Scarlett recognizes that she can no longer stay in this game, and Neeb wins match number 2. I mean, I do hope we're gonna see some longer games as well, right? That'd be nice. Usually it's especially this map that doesn't have the longer matches. Cyber Forest, considered to be the smallest map in the current map pool. Neeb, though, already sending out that probe towards the low ground. And on this map, I'm pretty sure even if you build the pylon right over there, you can still make your way across to probably... Can you actually block a 16 hatch here? Well, I guess we'll find out. The standard for Zerg nowadays is to go for a 16 hatch on the low ground. It may very well be the case, though, that Scarlett decides to wait for a little bit longer. Now, she does decide to go straight up to those 16 drones. We'll see if this pesky probe is going to be able to block the expansion, or if Scarlett is going to be able to get it down just barely in the nick of time. I don't think so. Nah, that's actually kind of painful, right? I mean, you ideally do want to grab this one. Scarlett, though, decides to not be all too worried after that game number 1. She just immediately jumps into the spawning pool here, and then also that extractor, pretending to head on over towards the 3rd base, but instead, she's now rerouting the drone towards the other side of the map. Okay, so at the very least, Neeb knows what's up. He might actually still double check the third base or maybe the natural right now to see if it's down over there. But Scarlett, I think she's gonna go for a proxy hatch. Ooh, I love this. Okay, so Scarlett has been playing extremely aggressive so far, right? I mean, obviously we saw that Nydus worm in game number 1. We saw a lot of Zerglings coming out to try and punish the wall that Neeb went for in game number 2. Neeb, though, the strong Protoss player that he is, he knows what's up and what could be going down right now, and he recognizes that he is in a world of trouble. Immediately throws up the second gateway here as well. Luckily for him, he did not go for the Nexus before Cybercore. That is something we sometimes see Protoss players do, and that could be a disaster. I think even adding on like a forge would not be a terrible idea, but we'll see how Neeb plans on dismantling this. Second gas right now coming up as well, which could just be, yeah, I think that's just an extractor trick to get the queen out, I guess, or just at the very least a couple more units. I guess Scarlett could always decide to just simply cancel this hatchery, but I like this. Having the Cybercore done already, it allows right now Neeb to go up towards the Stalker. He can also go ahead and plant down shield batteries. And I guess if you put down shield batteries, you kind of have like a reverse cannon rush, right? A kind of like a reverse immortal juggle rush where you can use it defensively instead. I guess the way it was originally meant. Regardless, one drone was pulled with these Zerglings as well, and a second one too. Apparently that's gonna allow spine crawlers right now to come up. Link speed though about halfway done right now. Neeb decides to plant down a second one of the shield batteries, and truth be told guys, I'm looking at this and I think that Neeb is in a really good spot. When Link speed finishes, obviously this becomes much harder. Managed to get the cancel right there, or even the kill on one of these spines as well. Scarlett went for a cheeky build, but it immediately got countered, and I think, well, even one Zealot might not actually be that big of a deal. I think that eventually Neeb should be able to clean this all up, especially with a third shield battery right now joining the fray here too. Still, Scarlett, I mean, if the previous games were any indication, right? It doesn't look like she likes transitioning from these hyper-aggressive builds. She's always really struck me as a macro-based Zerg, but apparently she is not feeling that right now. A lot of units still being produced right at this point, and even though the shield batteries are very useful here, one of them was killed. The two right now are low on energy. That means that Zerglings are just fighting straight up against Stalkers, which is a scenario that Zerg players will be able to do every day of the week, right? They will gladly fight Stalkers with just pure Zerglings. More and more spine crawlers are coming up. That Overlord is still alive as well, and if that is the case, the high ground vision here that the Overlord provides is going to allow these spine crawlers to start poking away at the units on top of the ramp as well. More and more links are coming up. She's not slowing down. There's no expansion on the other side of the map. Scarlett is 100% all in, but she does have two hatcheries continuously producing here as well. Is there a cyber... Okay. So there is a robotics facility right now coming up. I guess Neeb needs like an immortal? I guess an immortal or a prism would be extremely helpful, but this is actually something that seemed to be held really beautifully. I think this could be a disaster right now for the American Zerg player here. I mean, the spines right now are joining the fray. Queen's purposefully not transfusing. That does mean, of course, that there will be, or rather not injecting. That means that there's going to be a transfuse here available in just a little bit. This is critical, though. Okay, Cybercore does finish the warp gate upgrade. If that were not the case, and these units could just be produced the good old-fashioned way, that would have been absolutely terrible here for the Protoss player. Right now, though, with these units being able to get warped in, yes, Neeb can create a beautiful trap that forces these Zerglings to just straight up fight whatever they can. There's a lot of units right now running from the other side of the map as well, across towards the Protoss. More and more units are coming up, but the longer that this goes on, the bigger the advantage right here for Neeb becomes. He actually manages to get a beautiful set of force fields there, picks up the Queen, and I think that Neeb, even though it didn't look very good there initially, I think he's managed to hold. What a game. Just imagine if the Cybercore there was picked off and Warp Gate upgrade didn't finish. It's always difficult to judge how far along that upgrade is, right? But that would have been a completely different game if Neeb had to produce the units the good old-fashioned way. Well, apparently Scarlett, though, has decided that she's hoping that Protoss is going to move down and kill that hatchery. She's still just making Zerglings. Keep in mind, Neeb doesn't know, right? He has no idea about the amount of links that are currently out on the map. I like this. Taking the very safe approach, not making any unnecessary risks. Now we even see a Phoenix making its way across the map. That's obviously an hallucination. That's going to confirm whether or not a natural was taken. Scarlett is hoping that these units are going to move down, but here we go. Force fields will come up. Now, actually, still a lot of units do end up getting surrounded. but not even remotely enough right here. Yeah, no. The hatchery falls. The Warp Prism picks up those wounded zealots. And once again, we have a quick match. And Neeb is the one who is the victor. Alrighty, game number 4. We find ourselves on year 0. You know what? I'm actually a little surprised with how cheesy Scarlett is playing so far. A lot of very aggressive Zergling play, right? I mean, it worked out in game number 1, but I kind of feel like that worked primarily because Neeb ended up playing a little bit cheeky himself as well. He put down the Stargate in the wall, allowed Scarlett to scout out exactly what kind of tech path he was going for right from the get-go, and that allowed her to respond to that as well. And obviously, he also didn't really make a lot of defensive units to be able to deal with the Nydus warp aggression. Plus, I guess the map is just really not one where you can play super greedy on. However, in game number 2 and 3, he seemed to have a pretty easy time holding. Right? I mean, a couple times the Cybercore almost ended up going down before Warpgate was done, but I feel like he is one of those players who's really very strong when it comes to playing the defensive game, and him going so far for the robotics facility follow-ups, I mean, it's been working out in his favor really smoothly so far. It also surprises me a little because Scarlett is one of those players who's very well known for playing that macro game. I mean, sure, she can win against weaker players, I guess, by playing hyper cheesy as well and playing hyper aggressive, but especially back in the day, right? I'm talking like 2012, 2013 era or so, she was very well known for just playing macro pretty much every single game. At the very least, that's what I recall. She was one of the few Zerg players actually back in the day as well, who ended up getting queens dedicated just for base defense and then also creep spread. A lot of players were extremely impressed with how much creep spreads she managed to get out onto the board, and I mean, that is not to be underestimated. That is a very powerful mechanic, although nowadays, obviously, all the top-level Zergs are very good at playing with the bare-bones mechanics. You can't really differentiate yourself at the highest level anymore by going for a lot of creep spread. And I guess Scarlett, while she's still a very good macro player as well, she's not been feeling too confident in that regard. At the very least, that's what I'm reading so far out of these first couple of matches. I remember actually in the GSL Code S, she would also play rather aggressively as well. So we'll see, maybe that's going to be her new thing. I don't mind it. I don't mind it. I mean, the scariest cheesy players are the ones that are really good at macro as well, right? I've said it time and time again. The reason why, for example, someone like Haas is a really scary Protoss cheeser is because he can also take a small advantage and build it up into the mid game, right? There's a lot of cheeses out there that will play really aggressively every single game, and it just doesn't really work out in their favor because, you know, they don't really have much of a follow-up. The scariest cheesy players are the ones that just simply, what is... Okay, I guess one of them got stuck or something. What was that? Did he just... Oh, I guess... I didn't see what happened there. Was the Adept stuck over there? I guess Neeb decided to mass recall it, and Scarlett decided to dance the Overlord there. Just a little bit of posturing. I like it. I mean, that's like, you know, some low-key trash talk right there, although... I know Scarlett and Neeb are actually good friends, so I'm sure it's all in good nature. But anyways, we'll see where this series is gonna take us. Now, if you are gonna see some sort of macro though, I do think Year 0 is one of those maps where it can happen. I mean, obviously in this map, Nydus worms don't really care about the map size, right? But on this map, you can get a lot of bases for Zerg. If you draw a line straight vertically through the watchtowers, usually you have some really good bases that you can take on either side. And one other aspect of this game that kind of makes it more of a macro map is that wherever you go, you always expend, I guess with the exception of this one and then the one over here, but you pretty much always expend away from your opponent, and it basically allows you to take 3-4 bases relatively easily. Neeb though, testing out the waters once again. Not going for the Robo this time around, or testing the waters once again. He decides to go for the Phoenix right now into a Stargate. Second Stargate even going up as well. I love this. Okay, so I've said it a lot on this YouTube channel already as well, but I think double Stargate openers are phenomenal. Especially if Scarlett has been showing so far that she doesn't necessarily feel the need to make Spore Crawlers. At the very least, that's what we saw in game number 1. I guess Queens are going to be okay here, but double Phoenix production adds up very quickly. I love that kind of build, especially on the bigger maps, because they can deal... Whoa. That is style right there. Look at that. I know there's like action on the left, but did you see that Phoenix lifting the Queen backwards? I feel like that's like kind of like turning your hat around, right? That's the cool thing to do as well, right? I'm not cool enough for that kind of thing, but That was badass right there. That's a Phoenix with style. But I do think that Phoenix openers in general are really, really good just because they are almost guaranteed to deal damage. Now, if there's one thing, though, that Phoenixes aren't very good at, it's lifting up, like, Zerglings, right? It's not very... Well, they're good at it, but it's not very efficient. So I guess if Scarlett decides to play hyper-aggressively once again, Adepts are going to be the main way of dealing with those Zerglings. But I think if we are going to see Macro, and Scarlett is obviously already taking 3 bases right now. Big round of Zerglings once more, though. But if we are going to see Macro, it's likely going to be on this map. And I think Phoenixes are a really good answer right here in the early game to most of those Zerg units as well. I mean, you can pick up Queens, you can pick up Overlords for very, very cheap. Ooh, that was close. I mean, if that was like a little bit of a sidestep there, that would have changed that entirely. But Zealot will be forced to warp in right now as well. And I guess this is about the time as well where Neeb feels like he needs to show those Phoenixes. But basically, Phoenixes are guaranteed to deal a certain amount of damage. Because at some point, you just simply get pickoffs, whether or not you like it if you're a Zerg or you don't, right? I mean, yeah. Usually the best response for Zerg is to just sort of accept and, you know, take those losses and then eventually to power through and just make a lot of units and just sort of replace it. Ooh, great micro there by Neeb as well. You see that? Not losing anything right there. Decides to drop the Queen down, pick up with one of the full hit point Stalkers or one of the full hit point Phoenixes and to bring the weakened one to the back. Really cool play there by Neeb, but this is the kind of damage I'm talking about. Anyways, at the same time though, Scarlett still has a lot of units left over here from the early game. She decides to go after the 3rd base right now of the Protoss player. 3rd Nexus is acquired at a reasonable time. Pylon actually does get killed there. Phoenixes decide to make their way back home. But like I was saying, right, these Phoenixes, they have a limited amount of energy. You can't just lift up all of these units. So with reinforcing Zerglings right now coming up, I think that actually Scarlett has enough to pick up the 3rd. Yeah, certainly. I mean, the reinforcements aren't even a necessity. In the grand scheme of things, Scarlett has been drawn in quite a bit as well. So all of a sudden, we see Scarlett with that really nice mid-game advantage. She has to find a way still to deal with these Phoenixes. Because all of the Roaches, obviously, they basically were sent across the map on a bit of a death wish. They certainly weren't going to make their way back home. Except for this one, who apparently gets to live to tell the tale. Not entirely sure. I guess he gets to report back home and tell the fellow Zerg units how scary this Protoss player is. But yeah, Hydras right now are going to be the name of the game here for Scarlett. She has a lot of Queens as well. That should be enough, but man, that's a lot of Phoenixes. How many is that? 10 Phoenixes right now. We see the double switch right now, or the switch right now towards double robotic facility. So, double immortal production here. I love that. Big fan of that kind of move. And so far, I mean, Phoenixes are nice and all. But, yeah, so far, I mean, I don't think there's enough anti-air here for Zerg to deal with this. Look at that. So much damage being done here. Oof. So, there's this weird dynamic between Phoenixes and Hydras. Hydras are light units, and Phoenixes deal bonus damage to light. It's this weird dynamic because on paper, Hydras obviously are the unit to counter Phoenixes with, but only really in big numbers. You kind of need like twice the amount of Hydras to properly deal, or twice the amount of Hydras than there are Phoenixes to properly deal with this kind of thing. I mean, as long as they've got energy, Neeb can pick up these units very easily and just continuously harass here as well. So I'm curious here. Yeah, look at the amount of resources lost. Heavily in favor of Protoss, even though the 3rd Nexus had to be reacquired, and obviously that's gonna hurt that income quite a bit, but units lost heavily in favor right here of Protoss. There's a Prism right now joining the fray as well. 3rd Immortal is inside of that Prism, and I love that. Making Zerg think that this is just a dedicated push. Usually that's with 2 Immortals, but there is a 3rd Immortal available, and that one is currently unscouted. There it is. And, well, I guess at this point, there's gonna be a pretty big Protoss push happening at about the 9-minute mark. It's gonna be Hydras and Roaches here, and 1 Ravager that are gonna be able to defend, I guess, most of this as well. There are some good upgrades here, but no Hydra ranged yet, which means they're gonna have a really hard time shooting over these force fields. Love the positioning right there of the Prism, but it is not going to be enough to pick up that 1 weakened Immortal. Once again, Stalker's coming up, but I don't actually see any upgrades on any of these gateway units, so there's really not that much available here for Protoss to deal damage with. Not a lot of micro potential other than just the 1 Prism, and I think with these Phoenixes now also being picked up, this should be something that's holdable at least for Protoss. Oh my god, the 2 hit point Prism still daring to pick up the... oh my god, he still picks it up! Still daring to pick up the Immortal! But eventually, yeah, the Prism goes down, and with that, the Immortal gets picked up as well. Reinforcing Zerg units right now are joining the fray, and that should be enough here for Scarlett to clean up all of those Protoss units. In the meantime, though, this is a good game. This is awesome. In the meantime, Neeb has been transferring some of his probes towards the third base. He's tried his very best to saturate that one right now as well, but already, on the side of Zerg, Scarlett has built up towards a fourth hatchery. Now, like this, if there's one thing really good against Hydras, obviously it would be Colossi. They do bonus damage to light as well, and they have a lot of range. It's going to be difficult to reach that, so Robotics Bay is going to come into play here in just a little bit. The question is, though, is it going to be in time? Scarlett has been making non-stop units right here for a little while already. Phoenix is still worth their weight in gold, right? They continuously keep picking up more and more of those units as well. But the thing is, the longer that this goes on, right? As soon as the Colossi... Oh, wow! It's gonna be Disruptors instead. Okay, I think that Neeb is actually feeling the pressure then. As long as these units are out, there's still a chance for Neeb to hold on. But this push here for Zerg is gonna be really scary. Now, normally... Disruptors are not very common, right? Normally, they will catch a Zerg player off guard. But here we go. Scarlett decides to commit. She's moving forward. Trying to obviously negate as much of the damage here of the Immortal as possible. Disruptors are out. And they do get scouted. That's a big deal. That's a really big deal. You know what else is a big deal? Those two connections right there. I love the positioning right here of those warped-in units. At the same time, the Phoenix has made their way towards the other side of the map. Not getting a whole lot of kills just yet, or maybe they are waiting to get more energy. The Immortals still shelling away at these Zerg units from a distance as well. Supply count, though, very, very heavily in favor right now for our Zerg player, who's currently streaming across the map with more and more units. No shield battery in sight, and I think that these Immortals then might very well lose their life in just a little bit as well. Ooh, nice connections once again on these Disruptors. One of them, though, does not get shot off, and I think that's because, indeed, it got killed. And Scarlett, while overrunning both the natural and the third, is indeed the one who obtains the victory in game number 4. Alrighty, so, Port Alexander LE. Now, just to clarify, by the way, even though I haven't seen the VODs of these casted matches, since, you know, I do go on Twitter and I talk about StarCraft pretty much all day, usually within minutes after one of these pro games happens, someone will reach out to me and ask what I thought of the series. So I do know who ends up winning this series in the end, but it's still exciting, though, to really see how these players face off against each other, right? Very evenly matched so far. Curious to see where Scarlett is going to take it right here. I mean, the macro game seems to favor her, right? I mean, am I crazy for saying that? The macro game suits her very, very well. I love the fact that you're a scary Zerg player and you're making it look like you're crazy enough to cheese every single match. But I kind of don't mind the idea of just playing a little bit more macro-focused. She seemed 100% in control right there in game number 4. And while the Phoenixes, they dealt a lot of damage, other than that, it really wasn't that scary of a game there for Scarlett. Right? She did a great job just simply dismantling it. I wonder, though, how that happens, right? If you're always playing macro, do you think at some point maybe it just gets a little bit boring and you're like, okay, I guess I'll go ahead and just play a little bit more aggressive now and see how it goes. Honestly, for those of you that watch the live stream, you probably know that I've also got an account that I've called Shame. It's an account where I basically cheese exclusively, so I play hyper aggressive pretty much every single match. Usually I like to play macro as well on my main account, but interestingly enough, I've now reached a very similar amount of MMR on my cheesing account as I did on my main account. Even though I don't usually cheese very often, I wonder where I can take it if I keep going with it, man. Maybe I can climb a little bit higher playing super cheesy than I actually can while playing macro. Who knows? Anyways, I genuinely do think, though, it's usually the macro players that like to cheese. Those are the ones that are really scary. It's not so much the players that like to cheese every single game. Those are the ones that are relatively easy to counter, as we see now at the highest level of StarCraft especially. Once you have someone who's a known cheeser, players will just simply hard counter it, right? I mean, for example, I casted Elaser versus Haas on this YouTube channel recently as well. I'll go ahead and post a link to that series down below in the description of this one. But in that series, Elaser knows that Haas obviously likes to play super aggressively. He just opens up with a counter every single time. He just opens up with a counter every time, and he doesn't allow Haas to go for the cheese. So if you're a known cheeser, right, if you've got that image of being a cheeser, players will just start hard countering you, and it doesn't get that kind of respect anymore. it doesn't really get that kind of value that you're looking for either. So I like what Scarlett is doing here, but I do want to see a little bit more macro play here as well. Anyways, once again, it is going to be that robotics facility here for Neeb. He went Stargate twice. Those are also the 2 games that he lost. He went Robo twice, and those are the 2 games that he won. So I guess we'll see a little bit more Robo play than for now. I mean, it makes sense. Man, this is always a little bit scary though, right? Especially if you know your opponent makes a lot of Zerglings, or at the very least likes to. Not completing the wall here at the natural is always a little bit scary, but it should be okay. There we go. The next gateway, the second one, it will come up here. And that's going to allow Neeb to finish that wall here, using both the Stalker as well as a single Adept. Now, we are currently at 45 supply here for Zerg, and indeed, there's a lair coming up and then +3 gases. To put that in perspective, normally we see a 3rd base go up for Zerg in a standard game at around the 30 to maybe 32-ish supply mark. Right now, we are 4 minutes into the game, we're at 51 supply, there is no 3rd hatchery to be seen anywhere. So I wonder what Scarlett is planning to go for. Is this just a good old 2-base Muta play? I don't see a Roachborn here either, so it could be like Lurkers, could be quick Hydras, or it could be quick Mutas. I know she's been playing quite a bit of Muta lately. Man, she's becoming a really scary Zerg player though, right? Like, okay, whoa, okay. Infestation Pit? This is so difficult to play against if you're Protoss. I would imagine that it's gonna be, I guess it could be Infestors. I guess it would be Swarm Hosts? Could also be for really quick Hive. There's a Nydus network right next to it. So I guess it's gonna be... Okay, I don't know if it's true, but can it be Nydus Worm together with Swarm Hosts? Not something I've seen a lot. We see a lot of Zerglings now being produced, so she's saving up gas. I think that has to be the case. Right, Swarm Host? There's not a lot of Overlords, though. Yeah, no, it is gonna be Swarm Host. Wow. What in the world? The thing is, Neeb knows that something's not quite right. He's still scouting. He knows that there's no 3rd base here for Zerg. He's going up to 8 gateways here, I think, in total. But that's gonna be defensive gateways, right? Actually, that's 9 gateways in total. Wow, very uncommon. But obviously the Locusts, they fly. So if you send the units into the Nydus Worm, right? Ooh, I love that. If you send the Swarm Host into the Nydus Worm, you can pop them out on the other side of the map and basically get the free Locust waves. Right now, I would like to think Neeb is desperately looking around his base. But there you go. The Locusts are going to be able to fly straight into the natural here. And they should be able to, at the very least, get a couple kills. A couple kills is all it takes. These Locust waves are essentially free. What a weird game. Okay, there's a lot more Swarmos, though. There's a lot more of them. You don't want to lose them for free. Yeah, definitely don't want to lose them for free. But there's an... Oh my god, that is so cool. So the Zerglings here are primarily to run into the natural, I guess, if Protoss decides to overextend, but also to provide that vision. Now, I like this. Neeb, in the meantime, not too bothered by this. I guess this is a build that he's seen before. He decides to send in at least a couple of those Adepts. Now, here's the fun part as well. While the Nydus Worm is out, as long as units are in the Nydus network, they can't be damaged. And they can actually kill a Nexus real quick. Okay, instead, apparently, she decides to go for a couple of those pylons, unpowering a lot of structures, and that means these gateways, they cannot be used for reinforcements anymore. Still, though, Neeb has got a very scary amount of units, and even though he can't warp in a whole lot of units at this point, he's still going to be able to just simply put down another pylon here and eventually continue the pressure. Obviously, Swarmos, they are great, but they also only can be utilized in their full force every once in a while. They are completely on cooldown right now, and while Scarlett is desperately trying to stay in this game, Locust waves will be coming up here once again. I think that all Scarlett needs to do, or Neeb needs to do right here, is just back up. Just don't fight it. Zerglings coming in from the back. A lot of Zerglings actually coming in from the front as well. Drones pulled off the line. I kind of don't think Neeb needs to fight this, but he still has so many units left over. Drones are picked off left and right. The gateways once again are powered, and Neeb, he looked at that build, he recognized, you know what, that was cool and all. That was nice. You played a cool strat. But now let's go into the next game, because this is going to be a quick victory for me. I mean, yeah, sure, you can continue trying, right? Purposely not finishing up the hatchery right here, but there's no way. I mean, there's absolutely no way. Am I crazy? I would like to think that I'm not, but there's no way, right? How would you counter this right now if you're Scarlett? The magic locust wave somehow, some way, killing everything. I guess a Nydus worm right here to go back into the main. I guess that kind of works, but I mean, economy-wise, this game is 100% over. Even if Scarlett manages to somehow, some way hold on. She's playing 1 base versus 2 base. There's a lot of swarm hosts that do have the potential to deal a lot of damage as well, but 28 workers ended up going down. We see the weakened units picked up into that prism as well, and Scarlett indeed probably was thinking about the next game. She's forced to GG out in game number 5. Okay, so you know what that means, right? It is indeed going to be match point for Captain America himself, our Red Protoss player. He's been around for a really long time. I remember back in the day when he ended up winning, what was that event again? The Casper Cup, if I'm not mistaken. Basically, back in the day when everyone thought that Koreans were the best players in StarCraft 2, Neeb traveled all the way over to watch South Korea, and he ended up winning an event that he was invited into that was basically dominated by Korean players. And he showed them that indeed Americans perfectly are capable of smashing the competition. And ever since then, he's won my heart at the very least. Ever since then, he's become one of my personal favorite players. Just because he's so ridiculously good, and just because he kind of showed us all that it is possible to beat the mighty Korean players. Nowadays, obviously, with the world champion not being Korean, I mean, with the world champion being Cyril, of course, he's from Finland. We all know that that's the case, but I would say for like the first 6 years or so of StarCraft, everyone looked at the Koreans, and that's also why we call it Koreans and non-Koreans, right? Everyone looked at the Koreans as the best players in the world by far. But I guess those practice regimens of the Koreans also got implemented in the other places on the planet, and it allows now people from every single country to participate in those events and to actually do really, really well. Although I think on the whole, though, the Koreans still are the best. It's really hard to pinpoint why that is. I mean, one of the things that everyone always said was just work ethic. So since like it's a bit of a cultural difference, right? Since people work longer hours in general in Korea, like at least more hours than in the West. For example, where I'm from, people I think work on average like 39-ish hours a week. I know that's much higher over in Korea, so I guess it's mostly just a cultural difference or something along those lines. But a lot of those non-Korean players nowadays have also picked up those same strategies, and they have figured out how to get better and how to compete with the best of the best. And it's exciting right now. Honestly, I'm curious to see if Cyril is going to be able to continue his run throughout 2019 as well, like he did in 2018. Well, so far he hasn't been as successful, although I think he still earned like 70k in earnings so far in the first couple of months of the year. So even though he hasn't been as dominant, he's still looking very scary, but we'll see what the rest of the year is going to look like. Regardless, Scarlett decides to open up. It's almost like she heard my little speech, okay? She decides to open up much greedier this time around with a very quick third hatchery. The third hatchery, of course, at this point in time is going to be very helpful, mostly just for larva generation, which then can be utilized to build a lot of drones. Technically speaking, going for the quick third hatch can be a little bit risky if Protoss does not decide to go for the natural, as the overlord arrives after the third hatchery goes down. But Neeb, honestly, hasn't shown us any reason to be worried here so far. If you're Scarlett, I mean, in none of the games did he open up with anything different. So I would be very surprised as well if he decides to go for like a cannon rush all of a sudden when he's on match point on one of the biggest maps in the map pool. King's Cove. It's a nice map. On this map, actually, if I'm thinking about strategies that Scarlett could go for, right? On this map, it is pretty easy for Protoss to take 3 bases. It's really hard to punish that. So the third base, it's on this nice little ramp over here as well. It gets much harder once you go up to 4 bases. So personally, one of the things I do like to do on this map if I'm Zerg, I like to go ahead and try and contain Protoss or soft contain Protoss, but never really allowing them to move down the ramp. If you can prevent them from ever like going down this ramp or that ramp over there, you can essentially prevent them from getting that really big army. As long as you trade half decently, you can, for example, sit out right here with a lot of Hydraling Bane or maybe even Lurkers and just simply prevent them from moving across the map. And it's nice because, you know, Protoss has a hard time trying to grab a 4th if that happens. Anyways, we're a long way away from that. I don't think we're gonna see that, honestly, by judging at least how the rest of this series has looked so far. Scarlett, while she is going for a heavy amount of drones right now, she knows about the fact there's a Stargate opener, obviously. Okay, well, you know what? I don't mind this. I actually really like this. The fact that she's adding a lot more drones is certainly really, really good. Also actually delaying the lair a lot right over here. Look at that. Even sending drones already towards the third base. Only a single gas right now as well for the Canadian Zerg. So she's going for +1 melee first. I like this, honestly. So I'm assuming this is going to be like a 5-minute lair with a Baneling Nest or something along those lines, just to be safe against like 2-base Adept all-ins, which are relatively common nowadays, but you don't really need to worry about it too much. I don't think that Neeb really likes to go for something along those lines, but we'll see. Twilight Council is done. Almighty Neeb, show us what you want to do. I don't see a Stargate, or I don't see a Templar Archives or something along those lines. It is going to be Glaive to Depth. Okay. Lair does come up at the 5-minute mark. Scarlett does need to get either a Roachborn right now or a Baneling Nest. I'm not seeing either of it. Third base rather coming up right now at the 5-minute mark as well for Protoss, so that's very, very normal. Usually Stargate play gets followed up with a Warp Prism, right? It gets followed up with either Archon drops, which is why I was mentioning the Templar Archives, or it gets followed up with some sort of Twilight Council push. And in this case, we haven't seen Glaive to Depth just yet in this matchup. In this case, I think it's brilliant. Scarlett is playing a little bit greedy here. She's decided to cut out the Baneling Nest, assuming her opponent is not going to go for some sort of Zealot or maybe a Depth-based push. These Oracles are actually picking up a couple kills as well just to try and be a nuisance. She's still making a lot of drones. She does have a lot of Zerglings, but the Adepts are already making their way across the map. That upgrade, the Glaive upgrade for the Adepts, it's going to increase the attack speed of these units significantly. They're going to be able to pick up drones and Zerglings really easily. You need something more than just +1 attack. I mean, +1 attack is going to help out quite a bit, but it's still about a half minute or so from finishing right now as well. I guess it will line up nicely with the Glaive's upgrade, but here we go. The Adepts make their way towards the third base. There's no Zerglings anywhere. We see a quick Hydra Den coming up right now here for Scarlett, but I think she must have misread the scenario. I mean, +1 is going to finish up here, right? That's still a lot of Zerglings, but still. Glaive is done. As long as these Zerglings can't get a proper surround, it's super difficult. Oh my god! That is a meat grinder right there. We see, I guess, the Oracles dealing a bunch of damage here as well. Lynx are trying their best, though. You can see the effectiveness right here of +1 melee. But still, in the blink of an eye, Glaive to Depths can kill drones. And in just a couple of seconds, 14 drones end up going down, and that's obviously a disaster right here for Scarlett. Wonderful decision making though here by Neeb. I really like that. Just simply pushing with something that he hasn't done before so far in this series. I think Scarlett probably was assuming as well that she would go up against Archon drops, which admittedly are the most common follow-up to Stargate opener on a map like this. But yeah, you know, Adepts are very viable. They just have to walk across the map, and I guess they managed to do so without them getting spotted. Right now, Neeb happily sitting right here on 3 Nexi. He's got 64 workers versus 56 right here for Zerg. More drones are going to finish up as well, but Zerg never really wants to be in a scenario where they are even in economy. Right now, Neeb has a variety of options, right? We see a lot of additional gateways coming up, and I don't think that's a bad idea. There's 6 gates right now. This is going to be 10 gateways in total. You know what? Without the... I still have not seen a Baneling Nest, right? Without a Baneling Nest... There it is, finally. Without a Baneling Nest... I kind of feel like this is a good point to just move across the map and try and obtain the victory. Right? If you're the Protoss player right here, just go for an all-out assault. Charge is going to finish up here as well. It's still difficult, though, because obviously there is a lot of creep spread. I mean, we are talking about Scarlett here, right? So Scarlett's very good at that creep spread. But I think that going for a push based around Archons and Zealots is still going to be one of those pushes you can get a lot of value with. And considering the way that this early game went, I think this is kind of like the best follow-up. I mean, if you were to do like a 10 gateway push off of 3 Nexus, just blindly without dealing prior damage to Zerg, they should have a very significant army and they should be close to like maxing out by the time you get here. But at this point, Neeb has 120, well, 134 supply right now versus 120 here for Scarlett. And, well, there are a couple of Banelings. Banelings can connect with Zealots and deal a lot of damage, but it's just that these Zealots, man, they will slice and dice these Hydras very, very easily. Decent control there as well. A couple of the Zealots are going to town right there on the mineral line. But if there's one thing you do not want those Banelings to do, and that is indeed rolling into those Archons. The Hydras are getting picked up. Captain America is smelling blood in the water. I think that even though these Hydras are trying their best to run for their lives, with Scarlett's 4th base being picked off, I think she is in a world of hurt, as more reinforcements are gonna join the fray. Neeb was ready to warp in more of those High Templar, morph them into Archons, and then probably follow it up with more Zealots, as long as he had the resources to do so. And in a really well-fought series, it is Neeb who ended up winning WCS Winter America. Well done right there by Neeb, a much deserved victory. I hope you enjoyed watching this series. If you did, make sure you hit that like button down below. And if you want to see more, make sure you hit the subscribe button so you get notifications as soon as I upload more. A special shout out to the Patreon supporters. You guys are awesome. You can also follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Links to those are down below in the description. But for now, I want to thank you for watching. Have an amazing day. Do not forget to smile, alright? And I will see you once again in the next one.